And I was heartbroken. I was so upset. I was like, I wanted that job. And I didn't say that to her, but she saw that I was upset. And she asked, she's like, are you upset about it? What's going on? And I told her that I would have liked to be considered for the job. And what she said really stuck with me. And she's like, well, how was I supposed to know that? You didn't apply for the job. You didn't tell me you wanted the job. So I moved on and I made a decision. And it really stuck with me because I think we do that a lot where you kind of get in your head and you think about like, this is what I want to do. I want to do that next. Maybe you tell your friends, which is great. But if you don't actually put yourself forward and go for it, you're going to get it. You might not get the job, but there's absolutely no way that you're going to get it if you don't actively put yourself forward.
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples, not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz, real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
Imagine this. You've spent months ideating, planning, and crafting the perfect marketing campaign. The creative is stunning, the messaging is on point, and the target audience has been meticulously defined. But as the launch date approaches, things start to wobble. A key department is out of sync, a crucial piece of technology isn't ready, or the timeline starts to slip. Hey, we've all been there, standing on the precipice of what could be a game-changing launch, only to watch it teeter on the brink of failure. The truth is, no matter how brilliant your marketing idea is, it will never see the light of day without the support of a well-oiled machine behind it. And that machine is built on relationships. So I loved this lesson in a recent podcast guest application. Building healthy cross-functional relationships is the key to any successful marketing launch. Here to share the story behind that lesson, along with many more lesson-filled stories, is Nicole Sumner, the brand director at Ollie. Thanks for joining me, Nicole.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
All right, let's take a quick look at your background so people know who I'm talking to. You've been the account supervisor at Swirl. You've been the senior manager of integrated marketing at backcountry.com. And for the past 2 years, Nicole has been at Ollie. Ollie, if you're not familiar, has delivered over 200 million meals. And we'll find out what type of meals those are as we get going in this conversation. And Nicole leads a team of 9 marketers. So Nicole, give us a sense. What is your day like as brand director?
So first thing, I jump into Slack in the morning like so many other marketers, I'm sure. Ollie is a remote company, so we're distributed all across the country with many of our team members being on the East Coast. So I find myself playing catch up a little bit in the morning because I live in Salt Lake City, Utah on Mountain Time. So jump into conversations, and then I go into Rike, which is our project management tool, and I review any copy and creative that's ready for feedback, answer questions from my team so that they can keep moving on projects that they're working on, and they get the direction that they need to keep doing their jobs on a daily basis. And then a lot of my time is spent in meetings. So I go to a lot of cross-functional meetings with the product team, with other marketing teams at Ollie. We also have a growth marketing team and a retention team, and we work really closely on a lot of different projects. And I sit in as an input and like just to get perspective from the brand in those instances. And then I spend a lot of time in one-on-ones and brand related meetings to stay up to speed on things like our social media strategy and to provide guidance on an ongoing basis there.
So that sounds all very, business responsible and executional. And,
yes.
and I give you credit for that. But brand director, like, where do you get your ideas? Like when do, like, I didn't hear in that day, any chance where you're like sipping a cup of coffee, looking out the mountains, skiing, hiking, like coming up with the next brilliant idea? Because we have one really cool ice cream idea I want to ask you about, but go on.
That's a good call out. I do drink my morning coffee and read newsletters. So I usually do that before I start my workday in bed and just sit with myself and my thoughts. And I do love reading to be inspired by what other brands are doing. And then I have a dog, Ruben, which is fitting since I work for a dog food company. And my lunch walk is often my favorite time of day to just kind of get lost in my thoughts. And sometimes I listen to a podcast while I'm walking, and sometimes I just listen to the sounds of my neighborhood. And that is usually when I get those random thoughts about, oh, what if we did this? And I never thought of that before. And when I get back to my desk, I usually fire off a bunch of messages based on that.
Nice. Yeah, not when you're in the project management platform. And I just want to put a plug in anyone listening. The Marketing Sherpa newsletter goes great with coffee, and the How I Made It marketing podcast goes great with lunchtime walks. Okay,
Yes.
Enough of that. But let's jump into some of the lessons from your career and the stories behind them so we can learn from you. I've said it before, like I love marketing because we get to make things. And I don't think other industries get to make things like we do. Like I've never been anything else, but I don't think like podiatrists and actuaries and all these other jobs, not making things. So your first lesson here, I mentioned it in the open, building healthy cross-functional relationships is the key to any successful marketing launch. So how did you learn this lesson?
Yes, this was a great lesson that I learned. I learned pretty early on to the importance of building relationships in the fact that really everything that we do is in some ways asking for other people to support our ideas and to go along with what we want to do from a marketing perspective. And if you want someone to support your idea, you have to have a relationship with them, and you have to have supported them in some way if they have asked for a favor from you, or have asked for you to get behind something that they're really passionate about. So I really, now when I start a new job, this evolved naturally, but I now really make a point to set up meetings with people that are not related to work. When I was working in an office, it would be like grabbing lunch or getting coffee or going for a walk with someone, so that you can get out of like just the work mindset and actually build a real relationship and connect with someone about their family or their hobbies or anything outside of what you do for a living in the confines of your job. And now that I'm remote, I think, for anyone who's remote, setting a coffee or tea meeting, just like a catch up with someone that's not related to work, that could be a great way to achieve the same type of relationship building. But specifically, how this lesson really came into play was during my time at Backcountry. We had previously, when we would launch campaigns, there would be, it would only happen within marketing. And then once it would go live, we would get feedback from other folks on different teams, particularly our merchandising team that drives the product that we sell on the site. And they would, say something like, that didn't seem like the most authentic way to use that product, or why didn't we think about shooting it at this location? And it would kind of put a damper on the campaign launch, because no one wants to hear feedback like that from your key coworkers about how, like they thought you could have done it better. Basically, like even it doesn't matter if it's successful or not at that point, if there's a perception that maybe you didn't do it the best way possible. It just doesn't feel very good. So I worked on a new process where it feels overly corporate and like complex, but it really did work. So I would meet with those team members ahead of time when we were building out the marketing calendar, and check in with them and say, hey, we're going to do a marketing story on hiking. Do you have any thoughts on like the best products to feature? Or do you have any tips about how to choose hiking poles or how to choose hiking boots? And we would just have an open conversation, because they really are experts in their area beyond the product that they assort. And so having these conversations and then checking in again once we decided, okay, we're going to shoot this campaign in the studio and we're going to feature these models, and this is how the shot list is going to go. I'm just running this by you. If you have any input, let me know. Then once we got to the end, it really felt like they'd been part of the process the whole time. So there were no surprises. And it felt much more successful because we all were happy with the final outcome.
Yeah, so I applaud you for that. I think sometimes as marketers where we really fall down is with that internal marketing and that internal communications. We're so focused on the external customer and co-creation. When you take people along on the journey, they're more bought in, which is important for everyone in the company, but especially when customer facing. However, let me play devil's advocate for just a moment for our audience who might be listening and say, that sounds good in theory, but in practice. So how did you earn trust early in the process to avoid the too many cooks in the kitchen problem, right? So for example, when I interviewed Marco Mueller, the CMO of Aviva, on How I Made It in Marketing, one of his lessons was trust is earned, not given. And you talked about doing this when you're like early into a company. And like, I could just see a team being like, okay, this person's new, they understand it. And they could have those same gripes that you talk about after the campaign is launched, but at least the campaign is launched then, right? It's not like, sending the campaign off track and now we're 3 months later, it's not happening or. So this is a great idea. I think we should all practice it, but I could just hear some of the audience being like, it sounds good in theory, but I need to get this campaign launched in 2 months and I don't want any more roadblocks than I already have. So how did you build that trust on the early side of things, not to have that issue?
Yeah, that's a good question. I try to frame the conversations as input. There's a way to, it's hard to describe exactly how you would say this out loud, but that they really are just input into a process where you are deciding ultimately how it's done and how the project is going to come to life. So it's a fine line, but if you bring someone in and ask their opinion, you might not listen, you might not execute it exactly as they're asking, but you're still getting their input. And then if for whatever reason I decide, we're going to take that input and we're going to incorporate it, but we're going to do it slightly differently because I think that this is the right way to do it. And our creative team wants to do it this way. If you explain that and you explain your thought process and why you ultimately decided to go a slightly different direction, you still gain trust because you're being really open and you're communicating about why you're making decisions and that you're not just randomly deciding to do something because you think it looks good. Or, I think there's sometimes this notion of people in creative roles make emotional feelings and they don't take into account what performs or more like analytical thinking. So I really try to combat that myth as much as possible and communicate why we're making creative decisions. And then once a campaign launches, there's a lot more internal marketing that has to be done to share the results and to share how it's going so that you do build trust for the next time that you jump into a project. People can see like they have it covered. They know what they're doing. If they ask for my opinion at a specific time, I'll be happy to give it, but they're not going to try to overstep too much.
That's great. I know, like I said, we can all learn from that internal communication you're doing. We all need to do that a little more. You mentioned the kind of emotional aspect of being a creative as people see us like that. And I do feel like that is true to a certain level. Like for me, my ideas have always been my babies. It's very hard when someone says your baby is ugly. I mean, this is what we have to learn as professional marketers, but still you get attached. So I really appreciate this next lesson. It's just, again, another level of understanding the internal dynamics of an organization and playing well in them. You say sometimes you have to let go of a creative idea to ensure you have the opportunity to stand up for something you really believe in later. So this sounds true but painful. So how did you do this?
Yeah, this was a hard one to learn for me, and I feel like many people who go into the marketing field, I'm very passionate. I feel deeply. So I feel like that's a common theme that I think that makes you a good marketer to really have a strong sense of believing in what you're doing and getting behind it. And then if something doesn't go according to plan or someone gives you pretty severe feedback, it does hurt. And you have to kind of learn to build a thick skin a bit and get through that and be able to move on to the next idea. And so how I learned this was the months leading up to the pandemic. I had just been promoted at Backcountry, and I was doing my first seasonal launch campaign for the product that we developed in-house. So we were making mountain bike apparel, climbing apparel, and hiking apparel. And I planned a whole photo shoot in Sedona, and we had an incredible photographer, and we literally, like, weeks before the shutdown, we did this photo shoot. And as it was happening, like, many people were probably thinking, like, oh, this isn't going to be a big deal. Like, we're going to go home and things are going to be back to normal. This isn't something we really have to worry about. And as we came home and we started to edit the photos and we started to build all of our marketing assets, our team got sent home and we started working remotely, and we still kept charging forward. And then I think the campaign was supposed to launch like the end of March, which, if you remember, was maybe the worst timing so everyone was social distancing, and there were all these new cultural phenomenons that were happening. And the day before we were supposed to launch, our leadership team gave the feedback that showing people close together climbing and mountain biking and hiking, which is what typical outdoor assets look like, it just didn't feel right, since people were being asked to not do that in their daily lives and to find different ways to enjoy the outdoors, not with their friends. And it was really painful because we had spent a lot of time and money and creative energy to create video and photo, and we thought that they were perfectly on brand and beautiful assets. And I gave myself like 30 minutes to be really upset about it. And then I met with the creative team and had to deliver the bad news that we had to completely scrap the work that we'd been doing and come up with a new creative direction to launch the campaign in like less than a week. And the way that I feel like I've learned a good way to deliver news like that, so that it's empathetic, but really direct, and like, we have to figure this out and let's like work through this together and come up with a creative solution. And the team took that away and came up with a direction that was like studio photography. So no models, and then very focused on product features, and used a creative way to point out different elements of the items, so that it was less human, if you will, than typically in outdoor creative. It's all about like the experience, and it's showcasing the product in action, but it still felt really strong and technical, and we had fun with it, and we were able to still let our brand voice come through in the way that we animated it and added different like visual markers to the product. So at the end of the day, the creative was really well received by the leadership team and by our customers. It was a successful campaign, which is more important. But it also showcased that we could be creative in a stressful situation and figure out how to move forward fairly quickly. So I think, ultimately it was a good lesson to learn.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes restrictions and quick deadlines are the things that make us most creative, because we're forced to think that way. But it's a really interesting lesson you're giving. I didn't expect it was going to go that way, because I've interviewed a lot of marketers who went through the pandemic whose product literally, wouldn't work anymore. Like I interviewed the CMO who was launching Virgin Hotels Las Vegas, and it just hit right around that time. And it was like, all of a sudden, no, but I would think mountain biking would be perfect. You're out there and you're separated. But so let me ask you, the second part of your lesson is that's about later that, you can get something you really want later. So what you described seemed pretty evergreen. Were you able to launch it then a year after COVID or 6 months after, or 18 months? Was this like just kind of a temporary, all right, here's our just fixed short term, but like we still got this campaign that we can bring to light?
Sorry, what I really meant by that was when a different idea comes up later, like a totally different campaign or whatever it is that you want to fight for, if you are able to adapt and take feedback like that and work through it, then when the time comes that you really want to stand up for something and make a case for it, your team is the leadership team or whoever you're like defending that idea to is more receptive because you're not seen as someone who pushes back on feedback all the time. So that's more what I meant. We were able to use those assets later when restrictions loosened up, but the lesson itself was to be, as painful as it is, to pick and choose your battles for what you want to fight for creatively. And sometimes you have to take that feedback and adapt. And then when the day comes that like, this is the hill I'm going to stand on for marketing, you have, it's perceived better.
Well, did you have that experience later? Because I like that you mentioned the hill analogy, because my creative director used to say to me, like, you'd say, Dan, is this your hill to die on? Because if it is, I'll fight next to you. But if not, let it go. And because like as a writer, I mean, just you don't want anything changed sometimes. You know, they're messing up a little thing and you're like, no, they don't get it. And that's that was always a great lesson. Is this your hill to die on? And then you're thinking like, all right, it's not, and we'll wait for something else. So did that work out later for you?
It did. It worked out in my favor because I think I was in my time there, I was perceived as being a good collaborator and like worked well across teams. And then when I did have an idea that we felt really strongly about, the way that I delivered it, and I think like politely, if someone pushed back, would say, I really I respect your feedback on this, but creatively, we really feel strongly that we want to deliver it this way and want to give it a try. And we were able to do that later.
No, come on, the world isn't ending anymore. I can understand when the world's ending, we couldn't do that stuff, but it's not anymore. Let's do something fun.
Let's do something fun. Let's try it and see how it goes.
Right. Okay, so up to this point, there's been a very corporate conversation for a brand director, which I appreciate because you've shown us, like, as a creative or someone more creative side, how to navigate these things that we have to navigate. We are, I like to say, like, corporate artists. We are creatives within a business. But I do like your next lesson because it kind of brings back to that creativity part.
Yes.
You said, if you're the most passionate person in the room, your idea has a better chance of getting approved. So you just told us how, if you're the most reasonable person in the room, your next idea has a chance of getting approved.
Yes.
Tell us about this passion element and how your idea got approved.
Yeah. So during my time at Ollie, I had this random idea. I was out running. I was out for a run. Like you said, like, where do you get your random ideas? And I thought to myself, well, so Ollie makes human grade fresh dog food. And I thought, what if we made a dog ice cream that we could also send to our members as a nice treat alongside their dog's meals? And so we approached Van Leeuwen, if you've heard of them. They make really high quality, fun flavors. They do a lot of different collabs, and had this idea that we together could make dog ice cream. And so Ollie is really open to creative marketing ideas, which is one of the things I love the best about working here. But we, like many companies, you still have to pitch in your idea and get the financial approval from your CFO and build a bit of a business case around why this is a good idea for the brand and for the business. And so this was one of those ideas. I was like, the ice cream is my hill. Like, I just really felt strongly that it was a great brand opportunity. We had really good alignment with Van Leeuwen. We were going to reach a new audience outside of our existing dog parent customers. And so I worked on, like the pre-work before we got it approved was, reaching out to different people on our team, working with my analysts to come up with, projections around if we look at our previous best-selling treat and we have customer insights, we have survey data that shows that our customers are asking for an ice cream, then, we could project that this is going to sell at this percent. And then you look at the past collabs that Van Leeuwen has done and how many PR stories they've received. Well, they've never done a dog product before. So we think that this is going to be even more buzzworthy from a social media and PR standpoint. And so I definitely had to use my business analytics hat to build a case, all while knowing, just in my gut, that it was a really good idea. And I had to go through those steps to get it approved. But the whole time, I feel like I was also talking to other people on the team and kind of being a cheerleader for the project. And I got other people really excited about it as well, so that when the time came and the decision got approved, everyone was really excited to work on it. So I didn't have to, I did all the selling up front. So then when we got to go through with it, everyone from our fulfillment team who had to figure out how to ship ice cream for the first time and had to go through a lot of different transit tests that we've never done before. Our digital product team had to basically, build a new experience so that we could add this. We're a subscription company and it wasn't going to be a subscription product. So they had to do some work to make that feasible on the front end for customers. So there was a lot of work that had to go into this, but throughout the process, I was a positive cheerleader for the project. And everyone was really excited to get it through to bring it to life.
So that's a really interesting story. And I want to ask you now that in hindsight, what have you learned about doing collabs? What would you maybe do differently? What would you double down on? Because I see this, I don't know if it's happening more. It just seems to be happening more because there's that little fancy X, right? It's like Ollie X Van Leeuwen, and you see this everywhere. So they were really experienced with the Van Leeuwen. Seems like Ollie was less experienced with it. And as you mentioned, you had to make some specific changes. Ice cream shipping and changing from a subscription product. So in hindsight, what would you do the same? What would you do different? What did you learn about collabs?
I think collabs are really fun if done well. And by well, I mean they make sense for the brands. They're unexpected, but they make sense. So I feel like sometimes you see collabs that are I think just for the social media flash, but don't really make sense for the brands or the business. So I think what I learned is using a collab to increase brand awareness among your target audience in a place where they're already spending their time. So whether it's like a media relationship, they're already consuming media in a certain place, they're shopping for a different product for a totally different need, a different part of their life. And then they're exposed to your brand in a fun and unexpected way. So we're looking into other collabs for Ollie, but we're being thoughtful about what types of categories do we want to go into and making sure that the brand personality and the aesthetic of the brand that we're partnering with lines up with ours, so that when someone sees it, they're like, oh, I didn't see that coming, but I get it. That makes sense. So I think that's the biggest thing that I learned was it's not enough to just have a really fun idea. There does have to be some good brand and business alignment so that it actually succeeds. And then you're given the runway to do something like that again.
Okay, in the first half of How I Made It in Marketing, we talk about things we've made, which is often campaigns or brands, but sometimes it's an actual product like dog ice cream. I love it. In the second half of the episode, we're going to talk about lessons we learned from the people we made those things with. But first, I should mention that the How I Made It in Marketing podcast is underwritten by MechLabs AI, the parent organization of Marketing Sherpa. MechLabs AI was built on MechLabs' patented methodology, discovered from 10,000 marketing experiments. And now you can speak with its AI experts. I mean, actually talk to them. Just hit the start recording microphone icon to talk to it, or the read aloud speaker icon to hear it talk to you. You can try MechLabs AI for free. How about that? You don't even have to register to get started at mechlabsai.com. That's meclabsai.com. All right, Nicole, let's talk about some of the people you learned from, you collaborated with in your career. We mentioned you spent some time at Backcountry, and you mentioned Meg Keller, the VP of e-commerce marketing at Backcountry. And you said the lesson you learned from Meg was act like you already have the job title you want. So how'd you learn that?
Yes, Meg was a wonderful person that I worked with who she's still at Backcountry and has had a very successful career there. In the time that she was my manager, I had been working there for a number of years already, and I was really ready for a director title. I felt like I had proven myself. I had kind of been put through the ringer in terms of work that I've done. And if you looked at just everything that I'd accomplished, it really felt like it wasn't like I just wanted the title. I really felt like I deserved it. And she agreed, but at some companies, I'm sure other people can relate to this. There are like certain rules around you can only get promoted at a certain time, and there's only a certain number of people who can be promoted and at different intervals. And it can feel really frustrating to have some of those restrictions put in place. But kind of like what you were saying earlier, I feel like I've learned in some ways to play along with the rules of the corporate game to get ahead, essentially. Like if that's the type of company you're working at, you just have to figure out, what do I need to do to succeed under these circumstances? And that was what she taught me, was that, this isn't the time, but to make the argument even easier when the time comes, like, here's what you need to be doing the job that you want tomorrow. Here are the ways that you could be doing that job today without the title. And she was great at giving me the opportunity to kind of like shape my current job to set me up to be seen as like a seamless transition into the next role. So I took on new responsibility earlier that would ultimately be expected at the next level.
So I think part of our ways to advance in our career as marketers is sometimes to be not just marketers, right? Not the obvious thing, just buying media or PPC ads or whatever it is, creating those brand campaigns. So I wonder, either in this role or other roles, was there something you did that maybe was outside the typical role of a marketer to help you get a promotion? I mean, you used the ice cream example. And I'll give you one example from when I interviewed Clinton Bonner, the vice president of marketing at launch by NTT Data. I like one of his lessons. He said, think, build, and scale like a product owner, right? Again, we're not just buying media. And he gave an example of for leads that were coming in, he wanted to give them a chance to speak to a subject matter expert right away if they chose to. And he essentially built like this custom integration of different tools like Slack and all these other things to build a product, essentially what it was, to get people from, okay, raising their hand to you can speak to a subject matter expert right away. So that's one thing. We're not just marketers. We got to be product owners too. Was there anything you did like kind of to grow in your career that's not the typical marketing hat?
Yeah. I think the biggest things for me was I built new processes or new programs. So when something would come up, this happened a few times at Backcountry, where we wanted to make a video series. Like, we'd never done expert YouTube videos, and there was no one on the team that it made sense to own that. And so I raised my hand and said, at the time, my lane was social media and some cross-channel campaigns. And I said, I can do that. I can find a videographer, an editor, and I can build out what is like we need a studio and we need a writer to write the scripts, and then we'll film them and edit them, and we'll pick what products. We'll do product review videos, and then we'll do some other, like, what are the different types of videos we'll make, and that content strategy. So getting to do projects where you show that you can not just execute on something, you can build something new that's never been done before, and build the right team and figure out how to get it done and make a budget and like buy equipment that you've never had to purchase before, and like all of these little micro decisions, whatever that project is, really showing that you can take it from nothing to something is going to showcase that you can take on more responsibility, and you're seen in a different way, because you in your day-to-day job, you do one thing, but when you do something like that, you demonstrate that you can be more big picture, and you can figure out how to operationalize something that's never been done before.
Now that can be scary, right?
Totally.
Because we haven't done it before. And so I like this next lesson you say, it's okay if you've never done something before, say yes and figure it out.
Yes.
And you learned this from Katie Hartman, SVP and Group Account Director at 10,000 Design. So how'd you learn this? Did Katie ask you to do something and you're like, oh no? Or
Katie was great. So we worked together at Swirl. I lived in the Bay Area for a number of years, and Swirl was in San Francisco. And we, at the time, were the agency of record for the Microsoft stores. And we were doing all of their design elements when they launched new stores, and the in-store merchandising, anything that they needed. And the time came when they were looking for a new social media agency. And Katie volunteered to put in a pitch and to build a team at Swirl to execute on that. And at the time, we had never done anything like that as an agency. I was hired to be a social media strategist. So I was currently at Swirl working on different client projects, and kind of like on a project by project basis when they needed a social elements like influencers or some kind of social oriented activation to go along with a broader campaign. And so Katie approached me and said, would you want to work on this and help me lead this? You would have to come over full time and dedicate all of your time to Microsoft. And then like help me come up with the process of how we would develop social content on a weekly basis, and then help me hire and build a team to do this. And I was really nervous. I was nervous because I'd never done that. And I was nervous because every opportunity you're given as a marketer, it opens doors, but it also closes doors, if that makes sense. So by specializing and really focusing on one client, I was losing the opportunity to maybe work on a really cool project for another brand that I didn't even know about yet. But ultimately, I decided it was worth it to kind of go deep and to build this out and to figure it out with her. And we did it. We won the business. We very quickly hired an art director, a copywriter, a social coordinator. We got new tools. We developed a whole creative workflow to figure out how to do it.
How in your career have you decided when to make a leap and when not to make a leap? Because you just said something that is so profoundly wise there, that every every time that something opens a door, it also closes another door. And I got to admit, maybe we've mentioned this a few times on How I Made It in Marketing, but more of the discussions have been around what we were previously talking about, like how do you move up to the next rung and into the next step in your career and some of these things. But we really haven't talked about as much like, okay, when you head down one pathway, maybe you're giving up another pathway, which takes on a whole new meaning when you're then deciding when to take the next step in your career. Because if we're saying yes to something, but what are we saying no to?
Yeah.
So is there anything you figured out? And that was much earlier in your career. You've since made several role changes to figure out what doors are closing and when you're okay with that.
Yeah. It's hard to know, but I think when I kind of going back to that gut feeling, when I'm excited about something, but really nervous about it, it feels like it's probably the right thing for me to be doing because it's out of my comfort zone, but something about it just speaks to my curiosity or my interests or what I'm really excited about marketing. And it's happened a couple times. When I joined the Swirl team, I had been like a broad marketer up until that point, and I chose to specialize and to go into social media at a time when, like, this was 2014, it was coming up, but you didn't know where it was going. And I remember talking to my dad at the time, and he's like a longtime creative advertising executive. And he was like, are you sure? Are you sure you want to do this? You want to work in social media? Is that a good idea? And I decided to go for it because there was something about it that just felt exciting, and I wanted to learn about it and figure out something new. And it was really the best decision I made because if I look at my career trajectory from there, that decision is what then opened the next door and then opened the next door and really led me to where I am today.
Like that, remember that movie Sliding Doors? I don't know if you ever saw that one little decision. It's like, where else could you be now if you didn't take it? Who knows what you'd be doing, right?
It's true. I don't know what I could be. I could be doing lots of different things in marketing.
You'd be a data analyst somewhere, right?
Yeah, who knows?
All right. So again, we've talked a lot about this career progression. I like you mentioning, okay, some of those decisions you make in your mind. But this last lesson is really a lesson to say like, hey, sometimes you also just got to go for it. Yeah. The lesson is you can't be upset over an opportunity that you don't raise your hand for. And you learn this from Hillary Benjamin, the CMO at Ollie. So how'd you learn this from Hillary? Yeah.
So Hillary, I'm lucky that this is my second time working for Hillary. She was also, a boss of mine at Backcountry for a couple of years before she came to Ollie. And at that time, I had been a manager and a senior manager for a number of years. And I was at that point in my career where I really wanted a director title. And someone on our team left and the brand director role became available. And at the time, it was funny because the woman who was leaving kind of came to me and said, I think you should go for the role. Like, I think of all the people on our team, even though I had been, so that at that time I had been more specialized in social media, and this would have broadened my expertise, and I would have had to take on a number of different functions under brand at the time. And it was kind of one of those moments where it made me really nervous, but I really wanted it. The problem was I didn't apply for the job. I just kind of talked to a couple of people about it and they knew I wanted it. I never told Hillary that I wanted the job. I didn't apply for it. And then a couple of weeks later, we had a one-on-one and she told me that she had found someone that she had previously worked with and they were going to come in and take the job. And she kind of changed the role a little bit so that it really made sense for this person that she brought in. And I was heartbroken. I was so upset. I was like, I wanted that job. And I didn't say that to her, but she saw that I was upset. And she asked, she's like, are you upset about it? What's going on? And I told her that I would have liked to be considered for the job. And what she said really stuck with me. And she's like, well, how was I supposed to know that? You didn't apply for the job. You didn't tell me you wanted the job. So I moved on and I made a decision. And it really stuck with me because I think we do that a lot where you kind of get in your head and you think about like, this is what I want to do. I want to do that next. Maybe you tell your friends, which is great. But if you don't actually put yourself forward and go for it, no way you're going to get it. You might not get the job, but there's absolutely no way that you're going to get it if you don't actively put yourself forward.
And I think that job, that role is akin to the role you currently have with the same boss, essentially, right?
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Did you like learn that lesson in this time? You're like, all right, Hillary, let's sit down. We got to talk because I want that role there at your new place. Or how'd that work
funny.
out?
Well, this goes back to the first lesson I learned was in the 2 years that passed between when I wanted the job and didn't go for it, and then I was brought on to Ollie. I really did the work to make sure that I became more well-rounded. I raised my hand for new opportunities. I really built my confidence so that then when the opportunity came up and Hillary was like Ollie's a startup, so it's a small team. So she was building out the team and it came time to build out the brand team. She knew me, she trusted me from my time working with her, but she also saw how I had grown in those 2 years that we didn't work together. And so she approached me and it was the right time and the right opportunity. So
you didn't raise your hand this time.
I didn't raise my hand this time.
So she gave you advice, which actually wasn't true because she reached out. No, it was because I'm sure she remembered 2 years ago you talking about it and she was thinking, hey, I think Nicole would be a good fit.
Yes.
Before I let you go, you said something that really piqued my interest. You said your dad worked in creative advertising. Yes. And I wonder if there's any lessons you learned from your dad, either because you went into this field and he directly talked to you, or just sometimes growing up around something, it just kind of seeps into our pores. Because for me personally, my parents did not work in this field. And so the conversations I have with them are more like, wait a minute, you get paid to think of ideas? How's that a real job? You're joking. So I think that's so cool to be in the same industry as your dad. So is there anything like you can attribute to like learning from him from growing up with that?
Yeah, I think so. He worked for a major advertising agency out of Detroit. That's where I grew up. And I always thought his job was really cool. He got to make commercials and he had like posters of different ads he'd done all over our house. And he was always making notes on them. This was before everything was digital. And he got to travel to cool places to make commercials, like I said. And the way that he would talk about what he did always sounded really interesting. And I kind of got into advertising by chance. I didn't plan to get on that path. And then my first job out of college ended up being a small boutique advertising agency. And that kind of got me on the path to marketing and creative and brand as I am today. And it's been fun because over the years, I get to talk to my dad about like, hey, this is what I'm working on. And he kind of pokes holes in it and asks me questions about, well, what are you really trying? Like, who are you really targeting? And are you connecting with them enough? And what do you think about this? So it's been really fun as I've gotten to move along my career to have him to bounce ideas off of and to share my work. And like, he really understands what I'm doing. And I do think I look back on that and I think that I'm sure it kind of seeped into my subconscious. And when I went to college, my marketing class in business school was the only thing that I was really interested in. I didn't like finance or accounting and just couldn't see myself working in spreadsheets all day. And I think it did in some ways inspire me to get onto the career path that I've been on.
That is a very sweet thing to get to talk shop with your dad. That is great. My daughter is going into public health, and so normally we have nothing in common, but she worked on this data science project. So for a short time, we had that little overlap where she was working on data science, and it was so much fun. Although I think I gave her too much feedback. Sometimes because towards the end, she'd show me stuff and be like, I just want to show you what I made. I don't need feedback. So we've talked about all these different things about what it means to be a marketer from all your lessons and all your stories. Nicole, if you had to break it down, what are the key qualities of an effective marketer?
So I think the number one quality, I think, is being proactive, and especially early in your career. So no one is going to tell you how to do your job. No one's going to give you step-by-step directions. And I think the best marketers that I've worked with now as a manager and a leader are the people who just will figure it out. They'll ask questions, but they'll do research. They'll ask specific questions as they are trying to figure something out. And I think just jumping in and starting to do something instead of having that feeling of like, I don't know where to start. What do I do? I think that is really important.
Well, thank you for sharing all the stories from your career, from where you started to where you are now, Nicole. It was a pleasure. I learned a lot from it.
Thank you. It was so great to be here. It's a really great conversation.
And thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketingsherpa.com.